Hello and welcome. It's our January Lunch and Learn webinar, which is a little different to usual in that we are not only having a look at the year ahead and what it might hold for our practices, but also hearing from a very inspirational speaker on accountancy issues. I do hope that you love it. Thank you very much for joining us today. If you don't already know me, my name is Julia Penny. I'm a past president of ICAEW and I write and speak regularly for Accounting CPD. Now, in a few moments, I will be joined by Rachel Harris, the founder of Strive Accountants. If you're a fan of social media and search out accountancy matters rather than silly cat videos, obviously none of us do that, do we? You will have no doubt come across Rachel, perhaps in her guise as Accountant She, where she provides advice for practices, among other businesses. If that's not how you spend your spare time, then be prepared for a new perspective on what it takes to build a successful practice. As always, we are open to questions, so feel free to post those in the Q&A. You can post them whenever they pop into your head. I won't necessarily deal with them at that point in time, but it's useful to see them as they arise. So do put questions in the Q&A. But before that, just to warm up your brains, it is January. We have at least got, some of us, a little bit of sunshine today, but let's get things going. What do you think the year ahead holds in terms of challenges and opportunities? So I'll be talking to Rachel about that, but what do you think the year ahead holds in terms of challenges and opportunities? Write your thoughts in the chat box if you can, rather than the Q&A box, in the chat box, which is available. And hi to everybody who's already said hi. It's really nice to see a little bit of connection there. So write your thoughts there. We'll come back to that periodically as we go through the webinar today. So enough of a preamble, well, almost. We should get on with the real meat of the webinar itself. And that means introducing our guest today, Rachel Harris. Now, Rachel is one of the leading financial experts of her generation, revolutionising the world of accounting. Rachel has generated a following of more than 300,000 people across multiple platforms, bringing exponential growth to her multi-million-pound group of companies, as we've mentioned, Accountancy and Strivex. A social media pioneer who's been featured by Forbes. She's also in high demand for TV and radio, appearing on ITV This Morning, ITV News, BBC Radio 5 Live, LBC and Times Radio. So as I said, you might have come across Rachel before. Rachel, let's say hello.
Hi, everyone. I'm blushing and was smiling a lot. Thank you so much. That was a lovely intro. Hi, everyone. I was just saying before we went live, we are very lucky to have so many of you signing up to a webinar in January. So if you're here for a bit of light relief and a nice fireside chat, Julia and I are here to answer lots of your questions and look to the year ahead. So thank you, Julia.
Absolutely, and welcome. I'm going to dip in before we start with our questions about what you think the challenges are to some of the points that we've got in the webinar chat. And it is great to see, people here and joining in. So client expectations, particularly relating to AI, that's a good one. Political stability, gosh, haven't we got a lot going on? Few of you have mentioned, political, lack of political stability, political uncertainty, and even on the small scale for accountants. I saw just earlier today that some of the deadlines for bringing in mandatory ACSP registration is now, I don't know, we're still looking at that. But of course, we've got some bigger geopolitical issues as well. Greatest challenge for some at retaining top talent. Yes, that's always an interesting thing. Competition for skilled individuals. Ray mentions metal prices, more mentions of AI. So I'll keep dipping in that if you haven't put your comment there. But I think, it's interesting to see where those thoughts are coming from. But let's start off. Let's have this conversation, Rachel. I've been dying to do this conversation for ages. So to kick us off, from your perspective, as a practice owner, what should accountancy firms be thinking of as they head into this still relatively new year?
Yeah, I say with challenges and opportunities. It's interesting. I was not surprised to see AI, but I was surprised at how many people said that AI was going to be more of a challenge than it was an opportunity. And
Uh-huh.
I feel like this is something that we have spent a lot of time working on in our firm, whether that is like innovation and using AI. And I see the use of AI being much less relevant when it comes to things like technical advice. Obviously, that's a minefield. Um, so I see it actually not sitting particularly close to the technical advisory work, but as a founder, as the owner of the firm, actually AI has a huge role to play in our lives. I was up this morning before I walked the dog. I was waiting for the sun to rise and I was tweaking and playing with some of my GPT employees. And so I have made custom GPTs that do the weird, the wacky, the wonderful customer service within my
Wow.
online brand, which is just answering frequently asked questions like I've forgotten my login details, all of the way through to a LinkedIn therapist that helps me turn my morning thoughts into LinkedIn posts. And so for me, AI is an incredible opportunity when we're looking at things like feedback loops, data analysis, even things as simple as we recently hit 200 five-star Google reviews as an accounting firm. And so I was doing lots of like deep dive analysis to understand the language used in those Google reviews and how can we embed that back into the marketing that we do. So that if actually those Google reviews are the desired outcome of a business owner, how can I make sure I'm speaking to those people at the other end when it comes to marketing? And so when it comes to things like feedback loops, data analysis, as a founder role, not as a technical advisory role, AI, I think, has huge opportunities and probably actually saves me at least one person headcount per year.
Okay, so you're seeing AI as more of an opportunity. And maybe, I mean, some of the comments were sort of neutral. It was just AI, as in it could have been
Yeah,
either challenge or opportunity. And I mean, I guess it's both because, the challenge bit is if you don't know about it, if you're not very comfortable, it's a whole new thing that you've got to get to grips with. Um, so you see AI as an opportunity. What about challenges? What do you think are the biggest challenges facing practices this year?
yeah, of course. We just before Christmas actually launched our MTD for its confidence boost training course, where we have built standardized working papers, standardized workflows, email templates, client surveys. We teach people how to like segment their portfolio, how to understand how to price for MTD, and we have also just had the Director General of HMRC come for. We had to get clearance from Number 10. It was her first ever podcast appearance.
Oh,
She has
wow.
come onto the Practice Owners podcast to do deep dives into MTD. And
Wow.
I think we're going to see, I think this could be one of the most pivotal points in our industry that I've seen
Mhm.
in my career, which has been 15 years long. I think we're going to see a bit of a parting of the wave in firms that really see MTD as the line that segments their client base. What I mean by
Mhm.
that is in January 2025, we actually made the decision to not take on sole traders anymore as clients. We again do lots of analysis, we do lots of feedback handling, whether that's grumbles, complaints, five-star Google reviews, to work out which clients are our happiest, what do they have in common. And we worked out that actually our target customer, the people that are the happiest paying our fees and receiving our service levels, aren't sole traders anymore. And so I think we're going to see a passing of the ways between um, practices that double down on not doing sole traders but being fantastic at limited company accounts, advisory, complex tax planning, and people who maybe have a bit of a race to the bottom segmentation when it comes to pricing in terms of price and value, doubling down on things like AI to get those tax returns filed. I think MTD brings with it an opportunity. If you do sit in the market of wanting sole trader work, there'll be lots of firms like ours that if I was you, I would be saying, what are you doing with your sole trader clients? In a world where a few years ago someone like me would look to sell that portfolio, actually lots
Mhm.
of people just want to offboard their clients easily. And so I actually think there would be a way to significantly increase market share as an accountant in this landscape. And if that's you, if I'm talking to you, you work with sole traders, you've got these blueprints, you've systemized that service level and you think you can handle it correctly, I would be banging on the doors of accounting firms who do not currently serve that market and say, what do you do with those leads? Can you pass them to me? So the big challenge with MTD, obviously for lots of us, is capacity.
Mm.
We'll all have the same clients that seem to have the same VAT quarters, and how we handle those quarterly compliance deadline reviews. We've done things like incentivize clients to change that quarter ends to smooth that capacity gap with
Mm.
actually what we're going to see is small and medium-sized firms struggle so heavily with capacity planning because we've got a portfolio of clients that all have the same 5 deadlines of the year. So we'll probably get rid of a bit of January stress, but it could bring significant capacity problems that if you are not prepared, I would be concerned for your firm.
Yeah, so we've got a lot of things which are impacting us that we have no control over, but then some of the things we can have control over, like, which clients do we actually concentrate on? Do we say, where is the best fit? I'll go down that. And as you say, it has huge benefits potentially to go down your best fit. And we are seeing the whole marketplace change quite a lot with some of the consolidators in the marketplace saying, okay, well, let's bring everything together. Let's systematize across a whole number of what were lots of little firms. But then you're still going to have firms that are outside of that. And maybe, as you say, they are going to be the ones picking up some of this MTD sole trader. But you still need to do it efficiently, don't you? Otherwise, it's going to be not very nice for anybody. So, moving on from that, now I know your practice isn't small anymore, but you still sort of understand the journey. If you were running a smaller or a growing practice, which of course you still are running a growing practice, what would you be prioritizing? Now, you've given us some hints in what you've just talked about, but what else would you be prioritizing in the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah. So if I was a growing firm, full stop, which I am, I think like technically we are still a small firm, probably we're multi-million pounds, but I'm pretty sure to get anywhere above small and medium, you've got to be far bigger than we are. So I think within that, for anyone that's growing a firm, our biggest the way that we can maximize the biggest impact on our time, and this is something that I have worked tirelessly over the last 5 years to do, is remove yourself from the day-to-day running of your firm. I used to have a lot of imposter syndrome about that thought. I used to open up things like LinkedIn and see people who had removed themselves from their practice and saw the practice either go downhill or saw the founder sort of retired. And I knew that I didn't want that. I didn't want to build something to remove myself, to just sort of unplug. I knew that I didn't want to sell. I knew that I wanted to, grow this really values driven firm that felt more like me, but scale it.
Mhm.
For me, that scaling incentive was I knew I wanted to become a parent. And through my career as an accountant, I over and over again was watching people build businesses and then in order to take parental leave, either have to wind it down or hand it over to someone or sell it, and didn't want that for myself. And so from day one of being self-employed was like, right, how am I going to do both? Like, I need to be able to scale it. I need it to feel like me, be values driven, be all of, those days where you sit at your desk and think, God, I would do it differently. I wanted it to be all of those things, but it could not depend on me. And so have worked tirelessly for that to happen over the last few years, and have seen such a profound impact, not only on my well-being, my quality of life, my ability to generate income, which has had a huge impact on everyone else in the business, but also my team. My team love it. They have more autonomy, they have more responsibility, they have more control. We track employee net promoter scores, client net promoter scores. Everything has got better by me having clarity on where the best return on investment of my time is, because I used to think I could impact more clients by doing more technical work. But the example that I always use is, if Mary Berry wanted to have maximum impact on the world, she wouldn't be able to create more hours in the day to bake more cakes. Actually, she does that by writing recipes, creating a recipe book, and then letting everyone else follow the same recipes. And so my job has become to write great recipes, hire great chefs, and then I know that the customers that come to my restaurant are receiving the same standard of food, but delivered with this like really personal service. And so if you are looking to, or you are scaling a firm and it feels hard, it feels like you're pushing a rock up a hill, our biggest challenge is to sometimes get out of the way and work out how you can remove yourself from the bits of the business that do not need to be you. And spoiler alert, it's always more than you think it is. I employ people far more intelligent than me. This is my 3rd January sober from filing any tax returns. I'm very happy about it. And so like it is possible. And I think so few accountants speak about that online, about, just what a profound impact you can have on all of your clients by removing yourself from the day to day to do more, be better, hire better, all of those things. And a lot of the people who are putting things like recruitment, retaining talent, things like job market, my job is analyzing those risks and being very good
Mm.
at it because I am not filing tax returns. And so if you are starting a firm, my biggest takeaway would be, do some. I do a lot of this stuff for free. I host a podcast dedicated to practice owners wanting to do the same. Like, there's so much content out there if you're looking for it. But that would be the one thing that I would recommend people prioritize for 2026 for sure.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, that's really important because, I mean, I talk to lots of practices as well, and one of the things that they always say, they don't have time to stop and think about the strategic, that they're just buried in the tax returns, the accounts, the audit, the whatever it is that is their day job or the technical side of things. But if nobody is bringing themselves up to look at that strategic level at what is going on, what they should be thinking of in terms of systems and whatever, then you're constantly just in that grind and you never get out of it. And sometimes I know it can feel a bit like building a fire break, which can be really harsh when you start
Yeah.
doing it, to take yourself out and say, no, I'm not going to do it. You're going to do it. But really important to get to that point. So that's really interesting. And it links into the next question. So um, what common mistakes, because I know you talk to a lot of practices, you advise a lot of them, what common mistakes uh, do you see practices making when they're trying to grow or modernize? So they're maybe trying to do what you're doing and not quite getting it right.
I think for me, there's two key things. The first is I see this time and time again. I'm sorry if you feel personally attacked, is using software to solve problems. I don't know if this is a bit of a hot take or a controversial opinion, but I see a lot of firm owners, wandering around exhibition halls like they're at Accountex, they're going to these shows, or the ICAEW conference. They are walking around these exhibition halls and they are looking for software to solve a problem. And I actually believe that software should be used to improve service levels, but it shouldn't be used as a plaster or a sticker for a problem. And I would recommend any firm owner mapping out the workflow of their practice. Like, could you draw in one simple diagram your client journey from prospect call to leaving you a 5-star Google review? And even then, if someone leaves you a 5-star Google review, are you saying, based on your experience, what's your advice to me if I'm looking to replicate the reason that you gave us a 5-star experience?
Mm.
So like if you can draw that out and work out, I'm a car going around a racetrack. If you keep coming off at the same corner, if it's mapped out, you can work out like, is it the corner? Is it the car? Is it the speed? Is it the angle? But if you don't have it mapped out, you just think, oh, it's not working. And so not using software to solve problems, I'd say, is the mistake I see time and time again. And then the second is not having clarity on the big picture. We call it North Star in our business.
Hmm.
Again, I mentioned earlier that, my first North Star was, can I pay my mortgage? My second North Star was, can I pay my mortgage off? And now we're at the point where our North Star is actually about impact. It's about becoming a top 100 firm, and actually about how we can do that whilst leaving a standing legacy within the accounting industry. And so, not having clarity on North Star can help you to say no to stuff. I think lots of us
Yeah.
need permission to say no to opportunities, speaking gigs, clients, the wrong clients. Not having clarity on that North Star, it becomes quite easy to start looking to your left, looking to your right, seeing what other firms are doing, what other firm owners are doing, what your peers are doing, and sort of compare yourself. Whereas actually, if you have explicit clarity on where you are going, this is great, this is great, but it's not for me.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that these are two really important things. I've worked in lots of different places. I've seen software being put into situ without having really thought about what the journey is, what is actually happening from a process point of view. And then all you do is you make all of the mistakes worse than they were before because you had inefficiencies in the way you did things before. And then you just, as you say, you do a sticking plaster and it really doesn't work. We all know what it is like when we have a cut on our finger and we have a sticking plaster. It just comes off the whole time. It's a nightmare. And as you say, trying to be clear on what you want to achieve allows you, it's a bit like the blinkers on the horse, isn't it? Going around the race course. This is what you're doing. You're just concentrating on this, not that and not the other. Um, but difficult things sometimes to implement, easier said than done. Um, and I'm sure, given that things are easier said than done, what have been the hardest couple of leadership challenges for you over the last year or two? Because there must have been challenges from a leadership point of view.
I could tell you 10 from today, Julia. Yeah, of course. I think I am sure this will resonate with a lot of people. I sometimes wish I could do my job I feel like people is probably the most complex and most difficult part of my job,
Mhm.
especially when generationally, maybe we are hiring and working with people who are quite different to us. Whether that is, Gen Z's approaching the market in quite a different way to how a millennial would or someone older. Like, it's just really interesting analyzing that market. I'd say a big challenge and a really big risk of ours. Like, if I looked at our risk register,
Mhm.
we have an incredibly strong pipeline of new work coming in from a technical standard. We've systemized and sort of franchised the inside of the firm. Our biggest risk on our risk register in most months is cultural risks. And so,
Mhm.
one of the biggest challenges I face is actually attracting a diverse workforce. I am a female founder who has grown a huge following online. A huge majority of my following are people who represent a demographic very similar to me, which is white young women. And so, very often, the job applications that I receive are from people who score the same demographics as me. That's something that I get trolled about every single day on LinkedIn. I get very angry messages from people on LinkedIn telling me, and it's something that is a really big focus for me for 2026 is how can I step out of receiving applications just from people within my pool. And even things like referrals and recommendations. We are a great place to work. We have an incredibly high ENPS score and people recommending people. But what that means is they are also recommending people who are within their network. And so
Yeah.
obviously not all diversity is visible, but based on visible diversity, I get trolled a lot online. And so one of my focuses is doing research, working out, all of the data I have so far tells me that up to 50 employees, it's very normal for the demographic of the team to represent the demographic of the founder. When you are a small, close knit team, that can happen. And we're currently at 25, so we're nowhere near 50 yet. But yeah, really big focus for me. And then second is just continuously making sure that we have a best in class benefits package. The job market has changed a lot since I became an employer 5 years ago, and just in that short space of time, see trends, difficulties. At times it's felt like the market was quite liquid and it was really easy for us to recruit. At other times it feels quite harder. And so,
Yeah.
again, if I can give any advice to anyone who is starting a firm, scaling a firm, and having a team is important to you, I would always encourage you to adopt an always on approach to recruitment. Make sure you have job adverts up permanently. Make sure you are always recruiting. When you are small, when you are agile, that is the difference between scalability and not. We specifically fall within that market because we are a zero outsourcing, zero offshoring firm. So 100% of our recruitment is in house on payroll full time. Um, and so we are specifically tied to that recruitment. And so, yeah, a big lesson line through scaling is adopt always on as soon as possible. That applies to marketing, it applies to recruitment. If you are thinking about recruitment and thinking about marketing when you have time to think about them, it's probably too late and you should have started it 6 months ago.
Yes, and I think that's often a catch that any business can get into. That it's like, oh, I can't grow because I haven't got any staff, and I haven't got any staff, so I can't grow. Whereas if you always do the marketing, you always do the recruitment, then you've probably got a pool of people ready to go with the next bit, and then you can grow, and it all goes together. More easily, but I'm fascinated. The diversity issue where you've got the reverse. Um, I have to say because if you look at all of the places which have been men only or largely men for ages and ages and ages, and they don't get trolled in quite the same way, I don't think.
No, they don't.
But increasingly we are recognizing the benefits, and I have to just drop this into the conversation. I read a fantastic book about diversity just recently called Rebel Ideas by Matthew Syed, who's a columnist in the Times, and he was talking about the fact diversity is not a nice to have. It is really essential for teams to be the absolute best that they can be, because you get different perspectives. Because, as you say, if everybody's like me, like you, whatever, it doesn't matter how good that you is. It, you're still coming from a point of view. So fantastic that, you recognize that that's something that you need to work on, and you're looking at, well, how can you appeal to other people as well? Because I think that has lessons for, all of us. Our diversity challenges might be the other way around, but it's still a really important message. So, um, moving on. Now, we sort of touched on some of these points already, because I know that some founders of businesses struggle to transform their role as the firm grows. Now, you've talked about some of it. Are there other things that, as a founder, as your firm grows, you need to take into account? Or is it just that stepping out of the day-to-day role? Is there anything else?
Yeah, for sure. I think again, if I could, if I could go back and do things differently, I am a professional oversharer, and I think so many people who do things like this just say the shiny stuff, and so like I hopefully sound like a voice note from your friend. Hopefully this feels like we're just on FaceTime, but I my mantras in life are to overshare and that you don't become poor by giving. And so if I could go back 5 years to when I started, I feel like actually some of the things that really helped us to scale were diversity in terms of qualification. Again, after I became an accountant, I did an MBA, so I learned a lot about like just all of the data sets that having diversity as a workforce benefits everyone, whether it
Mm.
is diversity of thought, diversity like in the traditional sense. I've actually just Googled that book so I can buy it after we get off the call. And so, again, I'm an accountant with an MBA. I run the business with my husband, James, who's a chartered accountant. And so, bringing in diversity of qualification has been something that has really, really helped us in a way that I think sometimes more traditional firms don't because of the old traditional partner model. Actually, because we are a husband and wife firm, we never plan on giving away equity, we never plan on exiting or selling. Actually, for us, license wise, as shareholders, we want more diversity in terms of the qualifications. So we have ICAEW, ACA, CTA, ATT, AAT, like we have everything, like we're collecting them. And so that's been something that has really helped us as well. And yeah, I think one of the biggest learnings from scaling has been in order to scale a business, you have to scale yourself. And I see a lot of people forget that or put themselves second. Something that we have built, which we've since turned into an online course that our clients get access to, is a quality of life audit. And this is something that me and my husband built into the business from day one. Again, I mentioned our goal for the first year was, can we pay our mortgage? The second year was like much bigger financial goals, which feel like champagne, vision board stuff. But every single year, every forecast that we build into the business comes from, what do we need? What do we need to get where we're going next? Whether that is, do you have a therapist? Do you have a safe place to talk about how hard it is when you have 25 people depending on you? How do you scale yourself at the same time as scaling the business? As much as we'd love it to, sometimes they don't scale at the same time. Sometimes the business scales past you. Sometimes you scale past the business, and they can feel hard for different reasons. And so I think putting yourself first, and I'd say most of the accountants that I work with, we work with accountants in lots of different ways. I obviously host the Practice Owners podcast all of the way through to having a like monthly program that people can be a part of, as well as selling lots of the stuff that we use in our firm to others to help. Time and time again, see people getting themselves into positions where they put clients first, not themselves. And so, yeah, would love, the reason
Yeah.
I've done this for free today, rather than just making it available for members, is to like share that impact. And so one of the best ways to say thank you for it being for free is to write down your biggest takeaways and like tag us on socials. And I think for me, I would love for that to be one of your biggest takeaways is you serve clients better when you prioritize yourself over the clients. Whether that is just making sure you're getting the solid 8 hours sleep in January, all of the way through to understanding what clients are right for me and what clients are wrong for me, that benefits everyone. But making sure you are scaling at the same rate as your business is something that's incredibly hard to do.
And I think I'm sure that will resonate with loads of our listeners, because the number of times that you talk to people, and or you look at the industry press, or you look at things like the Chartered Accountants Benevolent Association, CABA, that what do they get demands for? Help with stress, help with
Yeah.
burnout, help with, I am drowning because my clients need so much. I am always on. I am answering emails at this time, at that time, and whatever. And sometimes we might have difficulties in controlling it ourselves if it's not our firm. But then that also says about, well, are you in the right place if you cannot have control over your life? And so those points about, you have got to be functioning first before you can be any use to anybody else, whether
And I
that's
think
business or
sometimes, like,
family.
I think sometimes as a profession, we are all taught to be quite modest and to put other people first. Like
Yeah.
the one common thread that I see in all of the accountants that I know are that we love helping people. I think so many of us were the kids at school that love maths, but we also loved helping people. And so I see that amongst so many people, and we become self-employed, we become accountants, we work in practice to help people. But very often if I was shopping around for an accountant, I wouldn't be looking at the modest one who was driving a beat up car. I'd be thinking, which accountant's driving a Porsche? Because that's the one that I want my business to look like. And so I think very often it we are almost the role models, I think, sometimes that our clients look to run businesses because we have the skill set that I think is the hardest to learn if you are not financially minded. And we are in such a privileged position that very often we are the first. Sometimes we are the only people, other than the founder, that have access to the financials of that business. And we have a
Mm.
responsibility to be leading our businesses as role models because I don't think people would ever understand how much your clients look to you as a role model for advice, whether that's how you're living your life, how you're running your business. And I think if you need that push to put yourself first, please let that be it. Just another prompt as well to keep your questions coming as we're talking. So don't
Yes,
feel
do.
shy.
Yeah, yeah, no, we haven't got questions yet. We had some comments that we looked at earlier, but yeah, do put your questions in. Now we've talked quite a lot about, shifting from moving back from that sort of hands-on to the other bits. Are there any particular system changes or mindset shifts which have been especially valuable to you in making that shift and that stepping back from day-to-day delivery?
Of course, I feel like if I could change my name, my middle name would become like process notes or systems. After I became an accountant, I did a master's in business, which is an MBA, and I actually through the course of my MBA became obsessed with the business model of McDonald's. I think
Oh.
for lots of us, we go to McDonald's not because of the marketing or because we think it's great food. We all go to McDonald's because we know what to expect. I know that I can walk into a local McDonald's or a McDonald's on a journey somewhere else and I know what to expect. I know the price point. I know that the outcome will be the same every time. And so I started to really dive into that franchise model as someone that didn't want to exit but wanted to scale whilst removing myself because I've never, ever walked into a McDonald's and expected the founder of McDonald's to be in there. And that's what I wanted to replicate. And so we did that through systemization, through processes. And so nothing happens within our business without a system or a process note or a playbook being written. When I talk and say that I sell digital products to other accountants, that's what I sell. We have built working papers for NTD for ITSA. We built working papers and confidence courses for things like VAT, management accounts, limited company accounts for people who feel like I've done the theory in my exams, but I missed the practical test. And
Yeah.
so that's what we do. Is that systemization has become really, really important to just make sure that there's no one point of failure. I think we call it the dining room table days. Like there was, three of us on the dining room table. I'm Googling like, can an employee sue me if they get a bad back because they're sat at my dining room table? Like if I think about those days, most of our processes lived in someone's head. And that is such a risky place to be in as a business owner. And so we stepped away from that as soon as possible and just created processes for people. Normally, the follow up question I get to that is, how do you get your team to follow them? And actually, I would back that back to you and say, that's not a process problem, that's a cultural problem. So, is it the building of the processes? How can you build your team into that? If I ran a firm right now with a few employees, all of the way up to 50 employees, I would just run a competition and say, next week is process week. I wouldn't recommend doing it in January. Next week is process week. Choose February, it's normally quite chill. Next week is process week. Every single task you do at work, you are going to follow this process for writing a process. You teach them how to do it. Every single job you do next week, I want you to write a process at the same time as doing your job. Whoever successfully, up to the standard, writes the most processes, I'll give you £100 gift card. If I said to you, you can get 40% of the processes written within your firm for £100. Would you do it? Of course you would. But that way, your team are bought in. They understand what a process is. They understand how to write one, how to follow one. They're bought into the mantra and like this world of writing processes. And culturally, the reason processes is cultural is because your team only ever have to see you deal with a client grumble or complain once with processes to understand that following a process protects everyone. I've had clients email me before with what they think is, a full-on complaint, and upon reading the email, I know that what they're saying is not true. I know that there's been a miscommunication. I know that they've got the wrong end of the stick because I know that my team follow the process and I know what the process is. And again, when we're looking to remove ourselves from the day-to-day running of the business, our priority, if we're looking after ourselves, is to be able to sleep at night, knowing if my clients get investigated by HMRC, if I get investigated by my governing body, we're chill. I've got, intelligent people who follow processes, who can handle the inquiries. I know my license is safe because everyone is doing
Mm.
what it should be. And that is the point. So I think, yeah, if I was you listening to this, that is exactly what I would do.
And yeah, I think that that process thing it strikes a chord with me because whilst I don't work in a traditional practice at all, so I don't do any of those sort of systemization things. I have worked in jobs where systems are important, and I still remember going back a very long time. I was a trainee chartered accountant in a firm, and we used to do, only some of you will even understand this, calling and casting, because this was of accounts. You updated them, they got typed on typewriters, and you changed and you reviewed, and then you had to do this calling and casting to make sure that it added up and to make sure that it all went through. None of that needed these days, really. But I was never told what the process was. There was no process written down for what this should involve. And I gradually discovered it involved about, 5 or 6 things. And in my annual review, I made what for me, career wise, was a mistake at the time. I said, well, why don't you have a checklist? Why don't you write down what this process is? It went down like a lead brick, but we're talking about a different age. And if the firm had had a process, it would be doing it so much better. Um, and that different view, that new perspective from somebody new, it was too hierarchical in those days to recognize the value of somebody new coming in and saying, but you don't have a process for this, and wouldn't it be better? Yours is clearly way more than that, but thank you so much for that insight. I love that. That's fantastic.
I think as
um,
well, when your brain almost gets turned on to that way of thinking, you start to like notice systems or processes. Like I recently did a fudge making experience and had to say to the guy afterwards, like, your processes are amazing. Like everything that they were asking us to do, you could tell had been like really well thought out by someone who was very driven in customer experience, all of the way through to, I mentioned earlier that our firm just hit 200 five-star Google reviews. If you compare that to, I trained at a top 100 that was over 100 years old, they had 9 Google reviews and their average was 3.6 stars. I think sometimes when we are scaling, when we're removing ourselves from the business, we make the mistake of thinking that our team's priorities are the same as ours. For example, if I am a training member of staff, I am building nice relationships with clients because I don't want them to shout at me, but I actually fundamentally do not care if I get a five-star Google review. I might like it if, I get a shout out in our all users teams group, but other than that, like it really doesn't make a difference to me. And so leaning back, I'm removed from the day to day, and I think I do want Google reviews because it helps with SEO and helps scale the business. But most importantly, if I'm getting 200 five-star Google reviews, not only am I getting this, I understand that every single member of my team is delivering five-star service every single day. And that's what I want. That's what I want. The output of that is a Google review. But what I want is every single team member delivering five-star service every single day. How do I get this? I have to motivate them to do this. And so with this, actually the easiest thing to do is say to the team, every single time you get a five-star Google review that mentions your name, you get a bonus. You can tell clients that you get a bonus. They care about you, you care about them. And that actually came from, again, when your brain is turned on to processes, you start to spot processes everywhere. That came from an escape room. I did an escape room,
oh,
and
wow.
this guy, his name was Jack, said at the end of the escape room, would you consider leaving us a five-star Google review? And I politely nodded, but I was like, I cannot be asked to get my phone out. I'm not going to leave you a Google review. You've done a great job. And then he said, every single time I get a Google review that mentions my name, I get an extra day's annual leave. Please, will you do it? And suddenly,
Wow.
the group of us, there were six of us, we all left a 5-star Google review and said that Jack was the best escape room host we'd ever had because it was him that we built the relationship with. It was him who did a great job. It was him that had made eye contact with us. And suddenly, that was the incentive that pushed us and him to the point of asking for a Google review and us giving it. And I was like, whoa, Jack, stop. This is amazing. You've just taught me how
Mm,
to get 200 5-star Google reviews in my business. This is how we do it. Because it's easy as a, as the boss, as the owner of the business to say more Google reviews. But like fundamentally asking for a 5-star Google review is uncomfortable if you're a junior member of staff. You don't want to do that.
yeah.
It feels a bit awkward. It feels like you think you've done a great job. So you're going to ask for it. But suddenly, when you financially incentivize every single team member to not only deliver 5-star service, but ask for it, I know the team are only ever asking for 5-star Google reviews because they know they've delivered it. And so just a bit of a switch in your head, like once that light is turned on, it's quite hard to turn it off. And so you will start to notice systems, processes, workflows that people follow in customer service jobs. If you ever speak to someone on the phone and you think, actually, you did a really good job there, like what was it? Challenge yourself because the best lessons I've learned in business that I've been able to plug into my firm, not one of them came from another accounting firm. They came from other businesses like escape rooms.
Yeah, and I think that just highlights, if you like, the diversity of thought. Quite often, because of the nature of accountancy firms, we're all accountants,
Yeah.
and as you say, your MBA brought a whole nother level of things into that. And the more diversity we get in the views and the experiences and how we relate to, oh, well, this worked in that business, I could use that in my business, makes it so much more powerful because we get more innovative ideas by doing all of those different things. So, that mindset shift of, oh, yeah, that would work in my business. But also, how do I incentivize my people to do what I want, but also which is good for them because they feel good. Everybody feel good about getting a 5-star review, doesn't they? Don't they? So, yeah, that's so powerful. Now, I'm going to stop. We got a question. So I'm going to sort of still carry on with some of the other questions that I've got for you. But um, Bridget, what do you expect to achieve by the end of 2026? So where are your ambitions lying for 2026?
Great question. Thank you, Bridget. Hi, it's lovely to meet you. My goals for 2026 is a big one. I was going to say lucky. It's definitely not luck. It's been a goal of mine for a really, really long time, but was really grateful to in 2025 have really sort of like broken through the ceiling of the TV world. And so I am a key, I appear on shows like This Morning, BBC News very frequently. I do shows like LBC. I do very high profile podcasts, which you might have seen before. And so continuing the momentum that's taken me 5 years to build with the TV world has been amazing. We filmed a show in 2025 that came out towards the end of 2025 with the BBC teaching financial education on mainstream TV, which has been absolutely incredible. Um, I also am the founder of a bursary scheme. It was the first ever corporate bursary scheme in the accounting industry, where every single year I fund people who cannot afford to become accountants to become one. In the last few years, we have done 15 students over the last 5 years. I currently employ one of the ex-students that came through the program, qualified as an
Wow.
accountant. Then now we employ her. And so for me, I'm at the point where the businesses, I have a tech business, an accounting firm. My personal brand is set to do 7 figures this year. I am at the point where the portfolio of businesses has, exceeded every financial measure that I could ever have achieved when I started the business 5 years ago, just thinking, can I pay my mortgage off? And so for me, my personal mantra is that you do not become poor by giving. And so I now measure my role, my life, my day to day work in impact that I can have on other people. The tech product that I'm building at the moment is specifically for accountants and bookkeepers who just want, better client onboarding. It's a product that I couldn't see in the market anywhere else, and so I have invested a chunk of money to hire a full-time developer into that product. Yeah, sorry, that was a long answer to that question, but yeah, continued
No,
growth. We
cool.
are gunning for the top 100 as an accounting firm, and yeah, I don't know. I feel it's hard. Sometimes feels hard to answer when I I was a free school meal kid, a charity shop clothes kid. Like I didn't go to university, and so I think for me, I've already surpassed so many expectations that I had for myself. But to me, becoming a role model for girls like me at school who love maths. And, I was quite good at maths. I skipped grades skipped levels at school, and so sat in sixth form classes in my school uniform. And so, yeah, it's really interesting. And so, oh, Richard's asked a question: how do you de-stress at the end of the day? Good question. I don't think I've ever been asked that question before. Um, so I'm actually really introverted. I feel like sometimes people mistake being introverted for not having social skills. I do actually have social skills. I'm just really introverted, and so people see me on things like this and think, that's a lie, you're an introvert. But I gain energy through being alone. And so I love a bit of trash TV. Give me the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills over anything else any day of the week. I love trash TV. I have a black Labrador called Blue, who's named after the Velociraptor in Jurassic World. And we walk for an hour every single day. In the mornings, that definitely sets my day. And then I am a breathwork person, like
Mhm.
understanding how to regulate my body, regulate my energy levels, and understand that no one else is in control of my body but me, has been incredible. And so I do lots of breath work. I do energy work as well. So things like Reiki, Kundalini. Yeah, I'm a bit of a spiritual girly as well as an accountant, which I feel is quite hard to find. But that's how I de stress at the end of the day.
Paul, I have to say, I mean, the walking bit, I go for a walk with my audiobook at the end of the day to switch, because I work at home, to switch between home and well, work and home life. I go in the dark as well, and some people think, "What,
Yeah,
you go out for a walk in the dark?" It's like, yes. So I have we have some street lights here, so it's not that dark. It's fine. But yes, um, very important to de-stress, as you say. We've got some other questions, sort of related, maybe. I mean, how do you manage time effectively? Um, is one of the other questions. So,
yeah, that's a really good question.
Rachel.
I'd love to give you guys, my job here is to make sure you guys leave with just as many actionable takeaways as possible. Managing time, I believe, is a skill. I believe it's a skill that we're definitely not taught at school. At school, I was taught that you are productive between the hours of 9 and 3 and not outside of that. And that it must be between these time periods, and that everyone is productive in the same way, which is sitting in a classroom reading books. And so, just to challenge your thought process on that, there's so many incredible resources, books, podcasts that can almost help you to explore and understand how you learn best. Again, my role is very strategic, it's very creative. I create content every single day on socials. I have to translate big complex topics into language that a 10-year-old can understand, because that's the language that performs well on socials. And so, with a strategic and creative job, most people think that they can just block out 1 hour that says be creative in their diary, and then suddenly they're going to be creative. But actually, so much of this depends on awareness of what time of day I do different tasks the best. For example, you get me before working hours, you don't want to be in my inbox because you're getting cleared. Like during working hours, there's emails coming in. I can't be sending them out at the same time. So awareness of when you do different types of tasks in the best way possible, awareness of your energy levels, awareness of different seasons in life and business, even things like if we don't have much sunlight, by the time the day finishes, I don't have much energy left. And so the first step of managing time effectively, I think, comes from having an awareness of, do tasks take the amount of time that you think they do? I'm always being like, oh, this is a 5 minute task, and then an hour later I'm still doing it. So just awareness of your energy levels, the way that you approach tasks, your awareness of time, if that is realistic or not. And then something that I do is I build an ideal diary. So every single quarter, I refresh this, or if something big changes within the business, I refresh this. But I build an ideal diary, which is my Bible of, if I am operating at my highest level and I am operating as a high performing, strategic, creative person in my business, what does my diary need to look like in order for that to happen? And so my PA is actually KPI'd on, so her performance is measured based on how closely she can get my schedule to align to my ideal diary. So that happens like algorithmically as a percentage. And so she is performance measured against how close to my ideal diary she is managing my time. I'm basically just a Sims character and I go where she tells me to. But I think it's really important to have that time to step away. Again, lots of us start businesses, become self-employed, start our own accounting firms to have more control, and then sometimes probably feel chained to your desk, feel like you have less control and more demands than you ever had before. So managing time is your job really is to set boundaries and just ask that other people follow them. I think rather than it being you that manages your time, manages your diary. Actually, I think through doing this, one of the biggest things that I found is that people very rarely view their calendar and their time as a reflection of their priorities. But your North Star, I should be able to work out what your North Star is by looking at your calendar. That's I
Yes.
always say to my husband, if if an alien landed on this planet and they could not speak English, but they followed you around for a week, would they know what your goals are?
Interesting. I love that sort of, yeah, the focus on you should be living what you want to be living in terms of, yeah, well, I do this, but it should sort of create a picture. And I know, I mean, time management is something that I've struggled with a lot of, if not entirely, my career, because I say yes to almost everything, and everything takes longer than I think. And I'm just after a lot of decades starting to realize, no, there's another chunk of time that I don't quite know where it goes, but I know it goes every single week. So it's like, no, it's a half a day of, and there's probably emails and stuff like that that you
Yeah.
haven't quite, put into your diary. But I think
But that's
that's,
awareness, right? That's
yeah,
awareness.
yeah. So
That's
gradually.
Julia saying, I need a hangover. I need a half day hangover every day that's just mop up the week so that you don't go
Yeah,
into a Monday feeling the hangover from the week before. And
yeah.
so again, this awareness, this like time tracking, the red, amber, green method, I teach a lot within like the podcast, which is at the end of every Friday, have dedicated time to go through your diary from that week and color code it red, amber, green. Red is things that actually had to be you. Amber is things that someone could do with a little bit of training. And green is literally anyone could do this. Why are you doing it? And just trying to delegate as much of the green as possible, higher for the amber, and red should be your focus. But that challenge, if someone followed you around for the week, would they know what your goals are? You're probably spending
Yep.
time on the wrong thing because if I own an accounting firm and I want to exit in 3 years, if you are currently doing tax returns, that's not telling me, like, I'm not going to work out that that's your goal. I'm going to think your purpose in life is to do tax returns and you must be really enjoying it because you're doing loads of tax returns.
Yes. So, anybody out there, probably you're not the tax return people, but who knows? If you're just doing tax returns or if you're just doing whatever, and that's not what you want to be doing, how are you going to change that? We got another great question come in. What is your advice for making quick decisions? And I don't think they mean bad quick decisions because they've said avoiding indecisiveness,
Mm-hmm.
particularly if you've got a bit of imposter syndrome sort of feeling, and therefore you might be worried about making decisions. So, what's your advice for making quick decisions?
Yeah, it's a really, really, really good question. I love the juicy questions as well, the ones that like you wouldn't see on LinkedIn. So keep the juicy ones coming. I believe that most problems in business can be solved in 7 minutes. So I have a 7 minute rule. If I ever feel imposter syndrome, I ask for help. I'm sponsored by asking for help. Um, ask people for help. There will be people that you meet at things like this. Behind our podcast, we have a big community where people ask each other for help. I believe that every problem or every decision can be made within 7 minutes, but sometimes you do need help. If you have imposter syndrome, it could be that actually your imposter syndrome will make you make a decision that isn't the right one. Ask people for help. I think so few people talk about this idea of like leverage. I am the
Yeah.
first person to say to Julia, like, how can I help you? How can I make sure this webinar goes as smoothly as possible? And I think, haha, Julia Penny owes me a favor. So when I ask her for a favor later, she'll be like, of course I'll help you. And again, this all comes back to like, you don't become poor by giving. The more you give, the more you get. The more when you do say, Julia, can you introduce me to this person? Can you introduce me to whatever? Like people say yes. I recently sent a voice note. I do a lot of work with Downing Street. I sit on the new media unit of Downing Street. I've interviewed Keir Starmer a few times. I sent a voice
Wow.
note to the woman in the Prime Minister's office earlier today and said, "Will Keir Starmer come on my podcast?" I feel like asking for help is something that people do not talk about enough. Like a lot of the opportunities that I've had in my career have happened because I've made them happen by saying like, who does that? Who do I need to speak to? Can I do that? And so, sorry, I don't know your name. It came through anonymously. But ask people for help. Say to people like, have you got 5 minutes? It doesn't have to be seven. Have you got 5 minutes? Have you got 7 minutes? Can I talk to you? The reason I chose seven is because it's quite an obscure number. It's not five, it's not 10. And I explain this concept to some of my friends, my like business friends. So they know when I say to them, have you got 7 minutes? They know why I'm asking is because I have a decision that needs to be made and I just want to spitball it off. So like, have you got 7 minutes has become our code for like, please, can I pick your brains? I promise it's 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question? But I really
Yeah.
hope that helps.
No, I mean that's fantastic because I think quite often even the education system sort of doesn't encourage us to reach out. Or although I think we're seeing some changes in that as things develop, but we get judged so much on our individual results. Don't cheat, don't ask anybody else, don't crib, don't, and then we get into adult life, and actually, it all works so much better if we ask each other because we can't all know everything, and we haven't all got the same perspective and experience. So that's fantastic advice.
I
We
also
are
think as well, sometimes we get so caught up in what if someone says no that we actually forget how nice it is when people ask us for stuff. Like if I said like, Julia, can I pick your brains on something? You'd probably be like, she wants to pick my brain.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
so rarely do people ask each other for stuff. And I think, like we all need those villagers in our life. And we, in order to have villagers, we have to be villagers. We have to be that support network for other people. And so you can get very caught up in what if someone says no, but it's 2026. You can just archive the chat. It's fine.
And yeah,
But what could
and
happen if?
well, that's it. What's a no? It doesn't get you further back. It just didn't take you forward. Try another person and you'll get a yes probably. We're rapidly moving to the end of this webinar, so I want to finish. If you could give one piece of advice to a practice owner who feels overwhelmed going into this year, what would it be?
I'd say that concept of, does your diary represent the business that you want tomorrow, not today? And so even if it is literally half an hour that you can buy back in any day through delegating, hiring, leveraging the team more, make sure that you have dedicated time to, just chip away at the idea of where your practice will be tomorrow. Because I think it's really easy to, if you don't brush your teeth today, you won't see an impact tomorrow. You might have bad breath, but like you don't see that impact, but compounds over time, it is ginormous. And so that was a really bad example. Sorry, everyone. But that compound interest is really, really interesting to see when it comes to time. And I'd say that has probably been the key differentiator in my career, is just like continuously chipping away at where I want to be tomorrow.
I think that's fantastic, and I think that is what a lot of us sort of lack when we're doing is what is our direction? Where are we trying to be? And are we getting there, and what is preventing us, stopping us, what is driving us forward, and making decisions to make sure that it happens. So I think that's fantastic advice. And as Rachel has said, it works best if you do something about it. So don't just have had a nice hour listening to all of this, actually do something about it. This will be available as a recording, so you can come back and you can listen to it. And as Rachel said, there's a ton of resources available on her website and in the socials and so on. Thank you, Rachel. I'm just going to finish with a very quick reminder to all our listeners of what's coming up. So our next Lunch and Learn webinar is on 25th of February with Andy Rainford and Andrew Law discussing tax. And then we've got Lisa Weaver's General Roundup webinar on 18th of February with Wayne Bartlett and Ross Maynard using BPM, business process management. Doesn't that link in so nicely with what we've been talking about processing here? So we do hope you'll be joining us for those as well. Thank you, Rachel. That was fantastic. I do hope our audience has enjoyed it. They seemed to enjoy it from all of the engagements and the questions. We hope that you found today useful, relevant, and it'll be even more useful and relevant if you do something about some of the fantastic hints that Rachel has come up with today. Thank you very much, everybody. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. Lovely to see you guys.
Bye-bye.